Have you ever opened your banking app just to confirm your money was still there? Even though you already knew no transactions had happened today, only to feel that brief sense of relief quietly disappear a few moments later? Many people believe financial anxiety will disappear after reaching a certain savings number, yet that number keeps moving farther away every time they seem to approach it. What if the problem is not having too little money, but spending so many years teaching your brain that money is the only place where safety exists? Living costs keep climbing, work feels less predictable, and economic headlines rarely sound reassuring, making financial anxiety quietly follow people into everyday decisions. Ironically, larger savings can sometimes bring a stronger fear of losing them, as the growing balance quietly adds another invisible weight to carry. A simple question rarely appears in personal finance conversations. What if the amount of money is not the only thing reacting inside this story? Welcome to the margin, where money is examined not only as numbers but also as something that quietly shapes the way people work, think, and live every day. In this video, we explore why many people remain stuck in survival mode even as their savings continue growing, and why a simple 15-second habit becomes part of that conversation. Since childhood, many of us have been taught one simple formula: saving more money should make life feel calmer over the long term. That advice was never completely wrong, but the world it came from has changed in ways that quietly reshape financial risk. Healthcare costs keep rising faster than wages, while home prices move further beyond what many workers can realistically afford. Even jobs that once felt stable can suddenly change because of restructuring, automation, or artificial intelligence, making uncertainty part of modern work. As a result, the brain starts placing the feeling of safety just beyond wherever our savings happen to be today. Psychology describes this as adaptation to constant threat, where the nervous system slowly stops separating real risk from imagined possibilities. That is why some people check their banking app over and over, not because they need money right then, but because they are searching for certainty. Unfortunately, that feeling of certainty lasts only a few seconds before the mind starts asking what unexpected expense could appear next month. Without realizing it, the bank account becomes a tool for calming anxiety instead of simply managing personal finances. This is where the cycle quietly begins, because the more often we seek safety from numbers, the more power those numbers hold over our emotions. Imagine someone who has just been paid, and instead of planning their finances, they keep opening their banking app just to make sure everything still looks okay. Seeing the balance brings a brief sense of relief, but only for a moment before another question quietly takes its place. What if the job disappears, the car breaks down, or another recession arrives without warning? Those questions make the brain feel threatened again, and before long the banking app gets opened once more. This is the false safety loop: money anxiety, checking the balance, temporary relief, another fear, and then the pattern quietly repeats. The biggest cost of this cycle is not the time it consumes, but how each repetition makes money feel more emotional. Over time, money stops feeling like a tool and starts carrying the weight of security, self-worth, and personal identity. When something becomes part of identity, even a small loss can feel much heavier than simple math suggests. Most important financial decisions, from investing to saving and building assets, depend on a calm state of mind rather than panic. Before talking about earning more money, the focus remains on how fear keeps taking over financial decisions again and again. Imagine Ethan, a 30-year-old analyst living in Chicago whose salary is solid, and whose emergency fund already covers nearly 8 months of living expenses. Almost every morning, before opening his work email, he checks his banking app simply to make sure everything still looks fine. What began as one quick check each day slowly turned into 5, 10, or even more without any meaningful reason. One day he noticed something unusual because the number in his account had barely changed, but the number of anxious moments had. His savings kept growing, yet his mind continued operating as if it were still stuck in survival mode from years earlier. Ethan's experience is more common than it seems, especially among young professionals who never notice how their relationship with money quietly changes. Many assume the problem is that their savings are still too small when the habit of seeking reassurance from a number has quietly become stronger. Every brief feeling of relief after checking the balance encourages the brain to repeat the same behavior again. The banking app slowly shifts from being a financial tool into something that temporarily calms anxiety, although the feeling never lasts very long. Left unchecked, money gradually stops feeling like security and instead becomes something that always seems to require another look. Breaking this cycle is not about saving more money, but about creating a small gap between fear and the next decision. That is where the 15-second rule begins, a simple pause designed to interrupt an automatic reaction before it becomes a habit. Whenever you feel the urge to check your balance because of panic, wait for 15 seconds before touching the screen. Spend the first 5 seconds taking a slow breath, not to remove the problem, but to signal that there is no immediate threat. During the next 5 seconds, ask yourself whether you truly need that information or whether you are simply looking for reassurance. Use the final 5 seconds to decide consciously whether opening the app is necessary instead of reacting from panic. It may sound too simple to matter, yet many meaningful changes begin by interrupting an automatic reaction. During those 15 seconds, you are teaching your brain that a sense of security does not always have to come from numbers on a screen. The difference feels small on the first day, but repeating the pause gradually replaces the old routine. Your relationship with money begins to shift, not because the balance changes, but because fear no longer leads every decision. Years ago, a financial psychologist described a client whose wealth was far above average. Yet he still felt as though his life was always one step away from falling apart. When asked how much money would finally make him feel safe, he named a number, but after reaching it years later, that number had quietly doubled. The problem was never the amount of money, but a definition of security that kept drifting further into the future. This pattern often appears in modern life, where every completed target is quickly replaced by another one before there is time to appreciate it. Many people are not only chasing money, but also a feeling they hope will arrive alongside it. That feeling does not always follow the balance in a bank account because anxiety is shaped by how the future is imagined, not only by mathematics. The margin believes money matters, but it works best when it stays a tool instead of becoming part of personal identity. When every sense of security depends on an account balance, even healthy spending can quietly feel like a threat. Viewing money as a tool for creating choices gradually shifts attention away from protecting numbers alone. There is another form of wealth that receives far less attention, where calm can still exist even when life refuses to follow the original plan. If we've been living inside the false safety loop, we need a different pattern that relies less on numbers and more on confidence in our own judgment. The margin calls this pattern the financial peace loop, a simple cycle that begins with awareness instead of money. The first step is pause by stopping for a brief moment before fear turns into a decision. The second step is observe by noticing what you're actually feeling before reacting to it. The third step is reframe by reminding yourself that money is a tool, not a measure of personal worth. The fourth step is decide only after looking at the facts instead of responding to a brief moment of panic. Decisions made calmly are often different from decisions shaped by fear because the thinking process stays clearer. Many modern financial lessons explain how to manage money, but they spend much less time explaining how to manage yourself. Before becoming a good investor, a person also develops decision-making habits because compounding applies to habits as well as money. Every time you choose calm over panic, the financial foundation beneath you becomes a little stronger than before. Many people picture financial freedom as reaching one specific number, believing life will somehow change once their bank account hits that target. Yet many people who eventually reach that goal still wake up carrying the very same financial anxiety because fear does not always follow logic. What actually changes is not the balance itself, but the relationship we build with money over time. At that point, the search for safety slowly shifts away from account balances and toward the ability to face change. Saving, investing, and building assets all continue to remain part of everyday life. The difference is that these actions now come from a different place rather than from the fear of losing everything. That subtle shift separates two people who may hold identical savings but experience daily life very differently. One person lives in constant worry over every dollar while the other simply sees money as one tool among many. The margin views the real destination of money as creating enough room to breathe when the future feels uncertain. Financial freedom is measured not only by what someone owns, but also by how much fear still shapes everyday decisions. Your bank balance may look exactly the same after today, but the way you look at money might begin to shift little by little. A calmer life does not always begin with a bigger number, because it can start when uncertainty is no longer treated like a constant threat. The 15-second rule will not remove every financial problem, but it can create a small space before panic takes over important decisions. That small moment is often the only difference between an impulsive reaction and a decision that unfolds over a much longer time horizon. If there is one idea to keep, it is that money is meant to support your life instead of making you constantly fear losing it. If conversations like this help you understand the emotional side of money and modern life, you can continue exploring more with the margin each week. Thank you for staying until the end, and hopefully this time together has offered more than information during a demanding season of life. Have you ever checked your bank balance hoping to feel calmer, only to end up feeling even more anxious, and what was that experience like for you?